Straight talk from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Peace deals, and then there's wars. The Armenia Azerbaijan conflict. What is that all about? Why are they bombing each other? Why are they killing each other? Do you even know where Azerbaijan and Armenia are? Do you know where these places are? And also, Turkey's leader, Erdogan, seems to want his empire back. He's now on the hunt or on the warpath of trying to get Jerusalem back into his hands. We're going to hear about that and more on this show. I want to take the remaining time I have for this very short segment just to introduce the show and say thank you to all of you supporters who have been supporting the station here at Israel News Talk Radio. We could not do it without you, without your support, without your monthly support, where you have so generously given to keep us on the airwaves, to let us give you our local news here in Israel, to let us deliver you international news through Fox. Every half an hour, you're getting some type of newscast as you're listening to our talk shows and podcasts, and we are honored to serve you, and we are honored to receive your support to continue to serve you. If you'd like to be one of the people that do support the station, and if you'd like to get your name up on our wall of fame as well, we'd be thrilled to have you there as one of our supporters. Go to israelnewstalkradio.com and click on that green donate button or the button that says donate. That goes across the top of the page on our menu bar. So that's how you can do it. And again, thank you to all of you supporters who have been helping the station. We need your support. It's a continuous need, and it's only because of you that we're able to keep being on the air to serve you and give you radio like no other place. All right, so all of these things coming up. By the end of the show, you're going to understand why there's a war going on in parts of the former Soviet Union, why they're killing each other, who's involved, Russia, Turkey, Armenia, Azerbaijan. Why are they fighting? It's the year 2020. We're supposed to be sophisticated. We're supposed to be more peaceful people, and yet fighting has begun. All right, we'll be right back.
The return of the Jewish people to the land of Israel was prophesied in the Bible thousands of years ago and is coming true today. Shalom. Join me, Josh Wander, on Israel Unplugged. Listen in as we delve into the spiritual and physical aspects of the Jewish return to Zion. We'll discuss the biblically mandated, historic, and of course practical understandings of this incredible transition from exile to redemption. That's Israel Unplugged, every Monday on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com.
All right, so there is a war going on the planet right now, in case you didn't know, and it's between two countries, Armenia and Azerbaijan. And we're going to find out exactly what that war is about, who is involved in it, and why it's taking place. A very brief introduction I want to give, and then we'll invite our guest on. So what's behind the fighting? We have Armenia and Azerbaijan. If you're not familiar with where that is, it's just east of Turkey. It's the former Soviet Union. And if you look at if you know where Russia is, just think that it is basically southwest of Russia, okay, along the Turkish border and the top of Iran to the west. So, these places, as I said, used to be part of the former Soviet Union. However, since the Soviet Union fell, this area called Nagorno-Karabakh they proclaimed independence because the Soviet Union fell, and they have their own identity. They say, and they claimed their independence. However, the international community has not recognized their independence. And this area is predominantly populated by ethnic Armenians. And now there is a game change playing here. The main players in this game are Armenia and Azerbaijan, of course. And then there's the backers, which are Russia and Turkey. And we're going to find out who's backing who and why this is happening with our guest, Dr. Mordechai Ben-Menachem. He is a researcher, former lecturer at Ben-Gurion University, and has authored over 70 books and 400 research papers on science, history, and more. He commentates on Mideast and world issues. Welcome to the show, Dr. Mordechai Ben-Menachem.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right, so explain to our listeners, why is this war happening, who is backing it, and why?
Okay, it's a little bit more complex than what you described just now. Okay, but let me.
That's why I have you on.
First of all, we have two independent countries, Armenia and Azerbaijan, both of which were former colonies of the Soviet Union. They had not, neither one of them had been conquered by the Russians a great deal of time, but they were under colonial control of Russia. First thing we need to be aware of is that Azerbaijan is 3 times the size of Armenia, both in terms of territory and in terms of population. And as a matter of fact, if we look at what's called their order of battle, that is to say the equipment, the military equipment that each one of them has, interestingly enough, in almost every category, Azerbaijan is 3 times more powerful than Armenia, in terms of number of tanks, number of planes, number of soldiers, blah, 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 3 times the size of Armenia. Now, there are 2, I don't know how to call it, islands places, not islands in the geographical sense, but islands in the geopolitical space. One is called Nagorno-Kanoba, which is a territory wholly contained within Azerbaijan and internationally recognized as being part of Azerbaijan. But as you said, it is primarily
populated by Armenia.
Ethnic Armenians.
Yeah.
And there's another territory which is to the west of Armenia and is totally separated geographically from Azerbaijan, but is part of Azerbaijan. So there's an ethnic mess here that we have, okay? And that territory is populated primarily by Azeris. That's just a comment in terms of the names of the peoples: Armenians and Azeris. Names of the countries: Armenia and Azerbaijan. A historical issue in terms of the Jewish question here. Everybody knows that Northern and Eastern Europe, Jews had a semi-separate language which was called Yiddish, and in Southern Europe and in North Africa, that Jews had a separate language called Ladino. Most people aren't aware that Jews in Azerbaijan also had their separate language. It was called Aramaic. The Jews of Azerbaijan, the Azeri Jews, speak Aramaic just as almost the exact same dialect of Aramaic in the Babylonian Talmud.
Right, in ancient times, right.
As opposed to that, I suppose you can say, the Jews of Armenia, what language did they speak? The answer is there never were Jews in Armenia because the anti-Semitism in Armenia was probably the most harsh of any country in the world. There was never a Jewish community in Armenia. And that's interesting because when the Turks in 1915 genocided the Armenians that lived within the Ottoman Empire, and some of those were part of what's today Turkey, and some of those were part of what was then Russia. The only place in the world that gave them sanctuary were the Jews of Jerusalem. So maybe we're crazy, maybe we're too nice, I don't know. But the Armenians, who have been the nastiest to us of any Christian population in the entire history of Christianity, the only ones who succored them when they were in their worst hour were the very same Jews. Another interesting historical fact is that Azerbaijan is, Armenia is a Christian country, as I've mentioned. Azerbaijan is an Islamic country, and it is Shia Islam. In other words, it's the same brand
as Iran.
As Iran. However, while we normally associate Shia Islam with extremism and very harsh brand of Islam, the Azeris are Shia, and they've been allies of Israel since the founding of both states. So that's a fascinating issue, because we'll get in a moment to the issue of what you were talking about, the backers, and the Azerbaijan is backed, at least in some respects, both by Turkey and by Israel, who are today, of course, mortal enemies.
Right, but how much is the involvement of Israel? As I understand, we sold them some weapons. They wanted to buy weapons, and we sold them some weapons. But are we directly involved in this conflict? I don't believe so.
Well, first of all, none of us certainly knows the answer to that. It's a legitimate question, but a lot of things happen that are very secret, and we don't really know the answer to that. So, is there involvement? Yes. What's the level of involvement on an ongoing basis? None of us know. There is involvement. Armenia made a ridiculous gesture of returning their ambassador from Israel to
Are you all right? You're not sick,
no,
right?
That's just
Tell us you're not sick.
Early morning cough.
Okay.
To protest, so to speak, the fact that the Azeris were using Israeli weapons against them, some of the more sophisticated weapons like drones and things like that. And it's a ridiculous gesture, because we've been selling Azerbaijan a weaponry for quite a long time. If people remember when what's his name? No, Israel Beitenu.
Naftali Bennett.
No, Israel Beitenu.
Oh, sorry, Lieberman.
Lieberman. When Lieberman was minister of was the foreign minister, he visited Azerbaijan more than once, and in 2012, when Gabi Ashkenazi was the chief of staff of the army, and the government of Israel was planning a decisive military strike against the Iranian nuclear facilities. The strike was supposed to originate in Azerbaijan. That's how close we are, the two countries. That they would, they of course border on Iran, and Azeris are the second largest ethnic group within Iran, and they despise the Iranians. Well, to be more accurate, they despise the Persians that control them.
All right. So, what is Turkey's interest in this war? Explain to our listeners.
Okay. First of all, Azeris are ethnically Turks. No, they speak the Azeri language is a form of Turkish. There are many peoples around Asia that are ethnic Turks. Everybody has heard of the Uyghurs in Western China that are ethnic Turks, and Muslims, and the Chinese repress them very harshly. And throughout the entire Southern Asian region, there are many different groups that are ethnic Turks, and the Turks are trying to leverage these various ethnicities to enhance their geopolitical status and to somehow recreate somewhat of an Ottoman Empire.
Okay, hold it right there. We have to take a break. We're going to be right back.
Hi everyone, this is Andrea Simento from Jerusalem, inviting you to drop everything and join me on my show, Pull Up a Chair. We'll visit this week's quirky stories, meet fabulous guests, and discover my Israel. Together we'll laugh, shout, and explain the topics that make us say, hey, we've got to talk about that. So get comfortable and pull up a chair with me, Andrea Simento, every Thursday on Israel News Talk Radio.
Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Did you know this psalm and many others were composed by a Jewish shepherd and musician who later became a king? Would you like to know some of the inner meanings of psalms to help you connect with God and strengthen your soul? An exciting and easy-to-read book is now available which will help you do just that. Software for the Soul, Psalms for Everyone, available on Kindle, Audible, and Amazon.com. Software for the Soul.
Modesty at the beach? It isn't just about body image. It's about feeling good. Modest swimsuits, so we don't get burned by the sun.
So we won't get ogled by strangers.
So we'll feel free to express ourselves without the need to expose ourselves.
Let Marcy Modest help you to cover up what you want, how you want.
Made in Israel.
Visit marcymodest.com. That's MARSEA modest.com.
And get a 10% discount on your first purchase.
So what's behind the fighting in the Armenia and Azerbaijan conflict or war? And there's a territory called Nagorno-Kanoba, which has proclaimed independence, although it's not recognized by the international community. It's been under Azerbaijan, and now there's a war going on in order to see who it's going to belong to or who it's going to continue to belong to. We'll see. It was part of the Soviet Union, the former Soviet Union, and this is why there's this conflict today. Just as we saw the Arab Spring dissolving because of the after effects of World War I, it's a similar situation here. And our guest is Dr. Mordechai Ben-Menachem. He is a commentator on Mideastern world issues, and he's here explaining to us more about this conflict. So we said that some of the players here are Turkey and Russia. Turkey is backing, you said, Azerbaijan, and you said that Israel has sold weapons also to this country. It's been a friend, at least friendly to Azerbaijan. Armenia, who had an embassy in Tel Aviv and was going to move it to Jerusalem, has now recalled their ambassador because Israel sold weapons to Azerbaijan. I'm not sure if Israel sold these weapons a long time ago and they're just angry about that, or if Israel recently did this. I don't know. Do you have any information on that, Mordechai?
As I said before, as far as I'm aware, this is not public knowledge. In other words, whatever the answer to that is, it's a state secret.
Okay, but other than that, we don't know of any Israeli involvement. This is mostly between Russia and Turkey that are backing these two countries.
Well, Turkey also is not all that, and it's not like in Libya where Turkey has troops on the ground. They're not backing it with troops on the ground at the moment. So they're backing it at some level. We don't really know what the Turkish backing means on a practical level, other than the fact that they are backing him. Again, the Azeris are ethnic Turks, so the Turks back their so-called ethnic cousins, but what that actually means on a practical level is not known. Same thing with Russia. We don't really know what Russia is involved in. Russia has, how shall I put this, beady eyes to the entire Caucasus region. If we remember, some years ago there was a a military conflict between Russia and Georgia, where the Russians retook a certain portion of Georgia, which is called South Ossetia.
In the English, it would be Georgia, but not the state. It's the country in the former Soviet Union. Go ahead.
Right. The correct name should actually be pronounced Georgia, but not Georgia, though they are spelled identically.
Yes.
And so Russia has interests at some level or at various levels throughout the Caucasus region. That includes Georgia, which is just to the north of both Armenia and Azerbaijan, and also in Armenia and Azerbaijan, and also in Iran and in Turkey. Russia has interests. Some of those interests are literally territorial. They wish to retake territories that they once controlled, and some of them are just what the Russians called the near abroad. In other words, the territories that are close to them, they want to have some overwhelming influence. Remember, Russia is the largest country in the world geographically, so they have a lot of near abroad.
Okay, so about again, Armenia, basically a Christian country, and Azerbaijan, basically a Muslim Shiite. That's what you're saying?
It's a very Christian country. It's a very religiously Christian country. They have their own sect of Christianity. I don't remember exactly what it's called. Some sort of Armenian Orthodoxy or something like that. I don't recall the exact name. But they have their own sect of Christianity, and that sect has been around basically since the beginning of Christianity almost. They're a very old Christian population.
Okay.
They have been Christian for an enormously long time, in many respects, before the Roman Empire was.
Okay, so what's going to happen now? Give us a scenario. If Azerbaijan wins the conflict, or if Armenia wins this conflict, this war?
Well, there's almost no chance that Armenia will win the conflict. As I said at the beginning before, in the previous segment, Azerbaijan is much, much more powerful in every respect, economically, militarily, demographically, in every respect. There's very little chance that Armenia can actually win anything here. They can make a lot of noise, which they're very good at, but winning is probably not on the table.
Okay, and so what will happen? Just a lot of people are going to die. Azerbaijan's going to win, which it's already basically in charge of that area. It's under Azerbaijan, so nothing really is going to happen here. You're saying, except for a bunch of more blood spilled.
Yeah, but basically that's the reality.
What sparked the conflict now?
Conflict. We've seen continuing conflict for several decades. It will go on. There is no reason why anything should change at the moment.
What sparked this now to develop into a full out war? Is it that Turkey got involved all of a sudden, and that's why this slow, brewing conflict exploded now into a war? Because Turkey's
no, it's mostly pig-headedness. I mean, both sides are just too pig-headed to really do anything other than be pig-headed.
But if Armenia knows it's going to lose this war because they're too weak, right? So why would they be involved in it? Did they say all of a sudden, oh, you know what, we talked with Russia, Russia's going to help us, and so now we have a chance, this is our chance to make our move?
No, I think you're being too logical and too realistic.
I'm sorry, I'm being too logical.
Realism here involved. I don't think there's anything here that anyone says, okay, we have a chance now, let's change things. Nothing is going to change. There's very little chance anything can change. It's not important enough for Russia to be heavily involved. Russia will be involved mostly because Russia loves to be involved more than anything else. And there's very little chance that anything real can actually happen to change the facts on the ground.
All right, so sum up in the last 3 minutes that we have to this segment, sum up exactly what is going on, what sparked it, and what we might see as the end, and what would happen.
Okay, what sparked it is probably just more pig-headedness, nothing of any real of any real value. There was not an incident that caused it. It's not like it's not like what happened between China and India, where the Chinese actually attempted to suddenly gain control of additional territory. It's a conflict which is ongoing all the time. There are always problems there. There are always people dying there. It just intensified over the last few weeks. That's all.
All right, because people are living there. You see pictures on the internet, and you see houses on fire. You see neighborhoods there, and I'm just trying to imagine people are going to work like they do every day. They're going to school. I mean, I don't know how bad the coronavirus is over there, but I would imagine it's not too bad. We don't hear about it in the news. And then all of a sudden, people are called up to the army and take your sides, and they start blowing each other up. Cannons and.
That's pretty much a correct description. By the way, we don't know what's going on with coronavirus there because there just aren't any. There's no data. There's no organized health ministry or something like that. These are pretty primitive countries. None of these countries are well developed. None of these countries have social welfare systems or things like that. Or none of these countries really give a hoot all that about their citizens. They're very much despotic countries. These are neither one of these countries are countries that a normal run-of-the-mill American or European would want to live there.
Okay.
They're not fun places to live.
All right. So can you give us so you're saying that there's not even worthwhile to give a scenario with Armenia winning because Armenia is going to lose, that they're just too weak, even with Russian backing? I mean, Syria, we thought that Assad was going to fall, and then Russia came in and they saved his neck. And Syria still exists.
Russia had a very, very clear interest in Syria. They wanted Tartus. They wanted their military bases, basically a naval base and an air base, and that's what they got. Russia has been looking for that kind of a base since the time of Ivan the Terrible, for many, many centuries now, and so they finally got what they wanted, a significant presence in the Eastern Mediterranean. That was their objective, and they attained it. But you're not going to see that in Armenia. Armenia just isn't all that important. It's a tiny country, about 2.5 or 3 million total population. In other words, the entire country is less than the size of a middle-sized European city. There's just not enough meat on that bone.
All right. So basically, we're looking at a region that Turkey is going to gain if Azerbaijan wins, right? Why? How are they going to gain?
Not necessarily. That's an interesting question. Remember, the fact that Turkey is involved and Israel is involved is amazing because on every other subject throughout the world, we're on opposing sides. And there, we're on the same side.
And what interest does Israel have in it?
As I said, Azerbaijan has been a good friend of Israel since its founding.
All right. Hold it right there. We'll be right back, everybody.
Are you interested in transforming your life, drawing closer to the Creator, and uncovering the deeper meanings and hidden treasures in the Hebrew Bible?
Then join me, Rav Yitzhak Michelson,
and me, William Hall,
on the Science of Kabbalah, where we are seeking to narrow the gap between what we understand of our physical and spiritual worlds. So make sure to tune in every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Israel time, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, here on Israel News Talk Radio.
Turkey's leader, Erdogan, last week stated these words: Jerusalem is ours. one of our cities. This the Turkish president declared on Thursday last week at the opening of the legislative session of the Turkish parliament in Ankara. Really? That's strange. I thought Jerusalem was the capital of Israel, was the capital of King David's. Where does Erdogan and Turkey come in? Here to tell us more about that, we have as our guest Dr. Mordechai Ben-Menachem. All right, go ahead. Tell us.
Mark Twain said that the best reflexive action to utter asininity is a good horse laugh.
He reminds me of Little Rocket Man. This Korean leader who's just out of his mind. He's like a narcissist. He thinks that owns the world. He wants to get the his Ottoman Empire back. That's what it seems to me. And it's just like in biblical times. It says they're all going to converge on Jerusalem. So what do you see here?
First of all, you're right. He wants his Ottoman Empire back. That's clearly the case. But it's more than that. It's not just that. Turkey right now is involved in enormous quantity of conflicts around it. In other words, in the first years of Erdogan's rule, and he's been ruling Turkey now for quite some time, his major principle was peaceful relations with all of its neighbors. At some point, if I remember correctly, it was in 2008, I'm not certain of the date, he changed his mind, and he decided to go for maximum conflicts with all of its neighbors. In other words, Turkey is in a situation of war and occupation in Syria, in Lebanon, in Iraq, in Persia, in Libya, and now in Armenia, Azerbaijan. So the only neighbor that Turkey has with whom it is not in either direct conflict or very close to direct conflict, I forgot to mention Greece, is Russia. Simply because Russia is so big that going into conflict with Russia would be suicidal. Turkey is in conflict with Greece, in conflict with France, something that people aren't aware of, that Macron really, really despises Erdogan. France has an Armenian population of considerable size, but that's not the reason why they're in conflict. They're in conflict because of Turkey's machinations with all the various countries in Eastern Mediterranean. As I said, Greece, Cyprus, Israel, Libya, etc. Lebanon. Lebanon is a former French colony, and so when Erdogan says he wants Jerusalem, quote unquote, he wants Jerusalem back, he's not just talking about the issue of the Ottoman Empire. He's talking about even more than that. He's not just talking about the issue of Islamism, radical Islamism. Turkey is investing very heavily in many places throughout Israel in the Arab section. If one goes down the road, for instance, from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem or from Jerusalem to Tel Aviv, one can see the very large town called Abu Ghosh. There's a Turkish mosque there with Turkish minarets, not the normal sort of the quote unquote normal kind of minarets that we're accustomed to seeing, but very obviously Turkish. And in many other places, almost all of the disturbances on the Temple Mount are disturbances funded directly by Turkey. Turkey is trying very hard to replace Abbas, as everybody knows, is in his 16th year of a 4-year term as president.
Right.
He's 84 years old, if I remember correctly. Clearly, he's not going to live a lot longer. And Erdogan wants to be his replacement. He wants to control the so-called Palestinian Authority.
And how is he going to do that? Is Abbas going to let him?
Well, Abbas is going to die eventually. I mean, he's 80. As I said, he's 84 years old.
Right, but they're furious over this peace that we're supposed to be having with Dubai. You know, Jerusalem and Dubai, the UAE. And Bahrain, he's furious about that, and they're quite tired of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, and they're now making relations with us. So he feels abandoned by them. He's angry. He might want to cozy up and give the reins to Erdogan in order just to get back at his enemy, Israel, the Jews.
Oh, yeah, that's clearly part of it. But it's not Abbas. Abbas is an old, senile, stupid old man. There's nothing left of Abbas. He has no control over anything anymore, even his own family.
So what do you see happening there?
Well, Erdogan is going to continue to fund chaos because that's what he does very, very well. He's going to continue to his conquests in Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq. He's going to continue his military adventures in Libya. He's attempting now military advances. We're talking about actual military movements against Greece and Cyprus. Remember, Turkey is an illegal occupier of 1/3 of Cyprus, of 1/3 of Cypriot territory. It is not recognized by anybody in the world. That is a totally illegal conflict initiated by Turkey with an actual colony of Turkish citizens who are forcibly moved from Turkey to Cyprus, which is against international law, the so-called Geneva Conventions. And he's going to continue with all of these conflicts until he either drops dead or somebody replaces him.
All right. How is Turkey so strong that they can be involved in so many different conflicts against Greece, helping the Palestinian Authority against Israel, being involved in the Azerbaijan and Armenian war, et cetera, et cetera? Well, how are they so powerful? This country that nobody even thinks about.
Well, first of all, they have a relatively large economy. They're not a trivial country. They're part of NATO. They have some level of support of the West by being a member of NATO. Remember, Obama supported them very heavily in all of their adventures. Luckily, the present president is quite a bit more intelligent. And they're very good at manipulating things. They're at one and the same time they're helping Iran against the sanctions. They help Iran circumvent the sanctions. They were very helpful to ISIS throughout its career. They still are. As I said, their economy is large. Their army is large. They can afford it. Well, they can't actually, but they think they can.
So the Americans and the West should pay more attention perhaps to Turkey. All right, so in the last 2 minutes that we have, literally 2 minutes, go.
Okay, one other observation that people, again, are not aware of is that Turkey, just as Iran, is pursuing atomic weapons openly and declared. They are pursuing atomic weapons research. So anybody that is concerned about things like this, like nuclear proliferation, you just said it, people should be more aware of and more cognizant of what's going on with Turkey. They are a danger to world peace, at least as large as Iran. Iran is a danger because it subverts countries by its proxies. Turkey is a danger because it goes in directly with its own troops and attempts to conquer places. As I said, the list is very long. Libya, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and now Azerbaijan. These are very, very dangerous countries that are using their resources. They're not small countries. They're not trivial countries. And they're using their resources to grow themselves, to get larger and to control more. Remember, if Turkey wins in Libya, they become a major oil country. This is not trivial stuff.
All right. So, yes. Turkey, I forgot about that. Turkey is involved in what's going on in Libya as well. And Libya is a big oil producer, like you said. All right. And yet, in spite of all of this, at the same time, Israel is seeing Arab and Islamic nations coming to the peace table, wanting to open up relations with us. This is something historic. It's mind-boggling. We're going to have to keep our eyes on what's happening here in the region, as we do here at Israel News Talk Radio, and we'll be exploring more of this as time goes on and developments develop. Thank you, Dr. Mordechai Ben-Menachem, for coming on the show with me today.
Thank you for having me, and I can only say keep the powder dry.
Moadim l'simcha. Have a happy Sukkot holiday. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy yourselves. I'll be back on Sunday.
If you love Israel News Talk Radio, then you'll love our Facebook page. We keep you up to date on what's happening in Israel, plus little surprise treasures that we don't share on the radio. Go now to follow us on Facebook. Just look for the Israel News Talk Radio Facebook page, and don't forget to subscribe and follow us by clicking on the like button. We post great stuff there that you'll want to share. Israel News Talk Radio on Facebook and Israel News Radio on Twitter.
If you're hearing this message, everyone else can too. Advertise with Israel News Talk Radio and get your message out to people. We'll build a personalized package for you. Contact advertising at israelnewstalkradio.com.
Straight talk from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Hey, this is Jake in Anchorage, Alaska, and I love listening to all the super interesting interviews and up-to-date information on what's happening in Israel.
Hello, this is Anna King, originally from London, now living in Israel. And what can I say? Israel News Talk Radio is my cup of tea.
My name is Bhaskar. I'm from India, and I love listening because you get to know the truth and wonderful voices from this lovely country.
Mom! Okay, wait a minute. Hi, this is Chava Dax, and I'm calling from the rolling hills of Ma'ale Adumim, just north of Jerusalem. I always listen to Israel News Talk Radio to get all the latest news and commentary and to keep me up to date every day.
This is Sarah Dax from Ma'ale Adumim, and I'm 12. I wish Israel News Talk Radio was boring so my mom wouldn't listen to it all the time. Mom!
You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
News, opinion, and more. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.